Greetings and welcome back to the channel. And in today's DCS video we're going to look at 5 different things to help you become a better Warbird pilot, so stick around. Alright, so welcome back, and we're in the P51 for right now, and we'll just go ahead and get started with tip number 1, and that is trim is your friend. Get familiar with how to trim your aircraft for various flight conditions. For right now, I'm looking at mine, and my hand is off of the stick and rudder pedals, and I'm almost flying a pretty straight and level path. I gotta nudge the stick every now and then. It's really, you really gotta work at it to get it dialed in perfectly, but you can get really close with straight and level. So the concept with trim is, if you have it available, you always want to trim out your rudder axis first. Now if we look down at my turn and bank coordinator, you notice that the ball is centered perfectly. That means the rudder is trimmed out for this particular flight condition, and that is the axis that you want to start with first if you have it available in your aircraft. Now the aircraft that do have this available are the P51, the P47, the Spitfire, and the Mosquito. German aircraft generally do not feature a rudder trim. So once you get the rudder centered up nicely, then you can deal with the other axes, your pitch and your ailerons, if you need to, in order to maintain whatever you're trying to do with your flight. Like in my case, I'm just doing a steady state cruise, and I'm trying to trim it out for for as close to hands-off flying. I mean, like I said, I may have to nudge the stick every now and then, but I'm not having to constantly adjust things just with the stick and pedals. What goes along with this is anytime you change the power setting of your engine, you will have to retrim. And I'll show this right now by throttling up. And you notice that my turn and bank coordinator immediately started deflecting in reaction to the new power setting, and also I'm starting a slight left bank. So I'm gonna roll wings level with aileron, feed in some rudder trim, and look at that, we're just about spot on. Again, you gotta kind of fiddle with this just a little bit to get it just right. It's not an instantaneous thing. It's not like the modern jets where the computer will help compensate. You gotta adjust, watch for the reaction, and adjust some more as you need. So now it looks like I'm in a slight climb now. So got the rudder dialed in, get the pitch down. You may end up with a little bit of oscillation, but once you get everything steadied out, I think you'll get it. Alright, so tip number 1 there just led into tip number 2. And that is, and this is pretty universal amongst all the piston engine Warbirds here, and that is the correct way to both increase and decrease your engine power. So right now I'm in cruise flight. Let's just pretend I just stumbled across a patrol of enemy fighters. I need to get my power level up right now and in a hurry. So what I would want to do is, anytime you want to increase power, you want to first increase your RPM. And I'm just going to go to max continuous. So I want to increase my RPM first and then bring up my manifold pressure. Doing that in that way helps keep your cylinder temperatures and pressures in check so that you're not overstressing your engine components, namely the connecting rods and bearings. Now to go down, it's the exact opposite. You want to decrease manifold pressure first and then bring down RPM as you need. Sometimes you may not need to adjust RPM, but you would definitely want to be familiar with the sequence. Now the better that you can handle that sequence of increasing and decreasing power, the happier your engine will be, and the better your flying experience will be as far as keeping your engine healthy. If you're always having engine troubles, start there and make sure that you're not overstressing your engine by mismanaging your throttle and your propeller. Alright, now let's move on to tip number 3. That's not good. Alright, so this situation leads me to tip number 3, and that is how to deal with an engine failure and to do a forced landing. Now, a few things that you need to do. You need to be familiar with your best glide speed, and in the P51, that is about 160 knots. That'll give you the farthest distance for the loss of altitude. And I don't have that number off the top of my head, but what we're going to do now is trim for that speed. So let's get the rudder trimmed out. A little much. Watching that turn and bank coordinator to get that ball centered up. Now with no torque coming from the engine, once you get that centered up, you're pretty much all set there. And then add a little bit of up elevator trim. Alright, so I'm up here at about 4,000 feet and falling. I need to trim down a little bit. I'm starting to slow down. We need to be about 160 here in the Mustang. And you may oscillate up and down as it's settling around that speed. That's just fine. Alright, a couple things that you want to have going through your head. At what altitude are you at when your engine decides to pack it in? Are you lower, or do you have sufficient altitude to make some decisions? Now, if you have the altitude, you may be able to get the landing gear down in time. Sometimes you may not, and you'd have to belly land. Again, this is just part of the decision making, and if you have time to take actions. In this case, I would have time to get my gear down to effect a safe landing. Also going into that is look around at your area. Looking around, I see a lot of farmland. I got some options here. You may not have that, like if you're flying over some mountainous terrain, you may not have any good options. And a bailout may be more preferable to a forced landing. But what I'm going to do is demo a belly landing. And it's very similar to doing a normal landing with your landing gear down. You just want to come in nice and gentle, time your flare, and set down as gentle as possible. If you time it too early and stall, you'll end up going to crash. Time it too late, and you may end up planting the prop right into the ground, and you'll flip, and the aircraft will do a backflip. Neither of which is a good option. Alright, if you have the option to, get your flaps down. Now, once you've committed to a landing site, you want to try to get your flaps down if you can, if you got the hydraulic pressure to do so. That'll definitely help you slow down and get your speed down. So right now I'm just going to land in this, just past this tree line. And again, just doing like a normal landing. Now once you touch down, you're going to slow down rapidly. Alright, so just time my flare. Here we go. And here we are. We are down. Not always the best, but you made it down safely, and the aircraft may be able to get fixed later, but you made it down safely. So that is a forced landing. Now let's look at a couple of other scenarios. Alright, so here we are in yet another bad situation. And let's just say, for the sake of this demonstration, that you either have some severe damage to your aircraft where it's very difficult to control, or even worse, your engine's on fire. Now, if you're in a fighter that only has a single engine and it's on fire, you essentially have no other option other than to bail out. If you're in the Mosquito, you do have a couple options because you do have fire extinguishers on that aircraft. But we want to set ourselves up to do a bailout. Now, unlike modern stuff with ejection seats, you have to have enough altitude to be able to do this. And to ensure the best chances of doing this, once you want to commit to a bailout, you want to get rid of the canopy. That's gone. And we want to slow ourselves down and basically just get up into a nice shallow climb and bleed off some airspeed, and you want to bail out at just about the point before you stall out. That gives you enough time to get out and get away from the aircraft before it starts to descend. So here's a good point to do so. And here we go. And away we go. And chute's open. And there goes the airplane. It's alright, we can go get ourselves another one. Alright, so that's a good technique for doing a bailout if the occasion ever arises. Alright, let's move on to the last thing. Alright, and finally for tip number 5, how to deal with engine damage. Now, this is largely going to be depending on what aircraft you're flying, whether or not it's air-cooled or liquid-cooled. The air-cooled ones definitely being a little bit more tougher than their liquid-cooled counterparts. And it's more of just a matter of reading the situation and determining the best course of action. Now, and also, where do you have to fly, and are you able to escape from combat and possibly nurse your aircraft back home? Now, if you're dealing with engine damage and you manage to get away from enemy action, the idea being is to get some altitude as best you can. Try to keep your engine healthy as long as possible. Watch your temperature gauges like a hawk, especially your oil pressure gauges, and do make note and look behind you and see if you're leaking anything. Anything dark, that's going to be engine oil. Gray tends to be hydraulic fluid, like a grayish white color. A whitish color is typically fuel. The idea, again, is just keep an eye on your engine gauges, get some altitude, and just try to maintain your engine as best possible, and try to get it home. Don't overstress it at that point, because you can quickly lead to an engine failure. Now, a note about the liquid-cooled aircraft, just like the Spitfire, Mosquito, P-51, BF-109, the FW-190, D9 Dora. If you catch a bullet or some flak in your cooling system and you're trailing a nice white clouds of smoke behind you, you have a punctured cooling system, and in that case it's only a matter of time before your engine runs out of coolant and leads to an overheat and your engine will seize. You do not have very much in the way of options when it comes to something like that. Now, the whole time you're trying to deal with the engine damage, you have to be ready to do either a forced landing or a bailout, and just something to be ready for. But as best you can, try to nurse that engine and get her home. Some of these things I can't easily simulate using the failures menu in the mission editor, but try to do what I can for you guys. Know your aircraft, know its limitations, and fly it to the best of your abilities as long as you can when you're dealing with engine damage. Alright, well, that's all I have for this week, folks. I'll be moving on to another Warbird for the next step in my guide series. Noticed that you guys seem to really like both the P-47 that I'm in right now, as well as the P-51 videos. So I will be moving on to another Warbird here shortly. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.